Hi, welcome to the bathtub. It's the old masturbator. You know me. This is a family-friendly edition without the parakeet. You notice it's a peace and a quiet settles over the bathtub when I put Dodo in the other room for this because she's getting more and more loud and obstreperous. And Lucky's downstairs hiding under the chair so I don't attack her. So she's on her medication, so she's basically okay. But you know, I don't know what to do with this dog. Anyway, it's not about this. Isn't the pet set? This is not pet talk. This is bathtub talk, and we're talking today. We're doing one of our theme shows, which is the highly successful in my imagination. Um, what's it called? Classical gas. We call it classical gas. I'm starting to turn into Joe Biden. I mean, I make 10 times more sense than Joe Biden. I ever did. I'll tell you that. But at the same time, I can see where the guy doesn't know the difference between Putin and Nancy Pelosi. I can understand that. I can see the confusion. Anyway, this is called classical gas, and we look at classical texts and we ask the perennial question: these are classics, but should we read them? And usually our answer is hell yes. We usually have hell yes. We don't do much else. And we're talking today about the Grapes of Wrath, one of the hell yeses of all time. So many, most of you out there have probably read this book. And many of us have even seen the movie, the great John Ford movie with Henry Fonda in it. We all know this wonderful novel, so we're not gonna have to surprise you with our final closing judgment on the book. But I reread this recently for various reasons. I won't go into at the moment, but I've been meaning to reread it before I die, and now I've done that. So now I can go off gently into the good night with Biden, who should be there, who might be there just a little before me. And Grapes of Wrath, 1939, first edition. I like the old Bantam paperbacks. You know me, I like the old mass market paperbacks. Trade paperbacks, they can blow me. Oops, Grandma, you didn't hear that. But anyway, I'm so glad to get rid of. I don't want any trade paperbacks in my house if I can help it, but I have to have some. Okay, stop muttering, and I'm going to just say a few things about this wonderful book. I must have read it when I was 18, 17 or 18. It's one of those books that, as I've said before, I think, it's the sort of book I give to kids, people of almost any age, particularly young people who don't read very much. People who, are sick of the school books they read and they don't want to read anymore. Of whatever's been assigned. They don't want to read Huckleberry Finn again, for God's sakes. I understand that. And I used to give it to always nephews and nieces and any young people I meet for birthdays or just for find extra copy, give it to them. Because it is the sort of book young people can read and identify with, because Steinbeck has a great way of getting you into the characters' heads. And he has a great, great sympathy for these people. It's almost any age can enjoy the book. And it's also a beautifully written book. And I have to say, reading it through at this time, I found two passages I want to read. I won't say very much about the book because you all know about it. It's about the Oklahoma Dust Bowl, and when all these kind of what's considered one of the greatest ecological disasters in American history, where this whole farmland was just decimated by heat and no rain. And the people there were, and as soon as the banks saw a chance to steal people's property, of course, they stole it. And that hasn't changed either. And it's about a family who, the young man Tom has just gotten out of prison for murdering a man in a bar fight. And he goes back to see his family, and they're just basically decimated. They have nothing left, and they're tying everything. They bought a car with the last of their money, and they're going to go to California, the land of plenty, and make their fortune. And the whole book is about this trek in this beat up old car with a bunch of people. Just basically, it looks like the Beverly Hillbillies with all the people in a car, one car, only it's covered up with, it's a truck, so it's filled with what few possessions they have, and beds and blankets. There's an old grandma and grandpa who are fighting all the time. There's a young girl, Rosa Sharon, I think. They have a different way of pronouncing it. And she's pregnant, and her husband comes along with her. And it's about this trip to California, in which they start it's not just this incredibly, he really does put you into this daily trauma of just the physical work of getting this crummy truck across country, and every nickel you spend is so worrisome. They got like $100 on this whole family. And he really knows how to make you wind you up and get you upset about this family, worried about them. And of course, in the course of the trip, they start to lose people. The whole book is about this family. It's holding itself together and keeping itself together. And it's a bit of a reader cheater, but spoiler. I mean, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. As they go through the book, it's basically how this horrific economic catastrophe, more than the ecological one, how these banks and farm growers and the police are all tied up in so much corruption just to take care of the wealthy in the country, and this whole family's just decimated. So slowly they're just broken apart. It's hard reading the second time because I remembered it so vividly. I mean, it's one of those books I remember so vividly, really right up to the end, when they have so little left and almost everybody's gone and everybody's died or run off and taken off. And the birth of this horrific scene where the Rosa Sharon, who's been pregnant all the way, has a baby and loses the baby. I'm telling you all the story. Anyway, almost every possible horrible thing that can happen to this family. It's a biblical novel, and yet you still keep reading because it's so beautifully written, and you're so much into the characters, so much into the scenes, that you just can't put it down. Now, it reminded me I could see now something I probably never noticed when I was a kid, which is it's this attempt to not just talk about this one family, but to try to put it in the context of this American catastrophe. And an American catastrophe, which has never stopped being catastrophic. It's still with us. All the stuff that these characters talk about, the way that capitalism works and tears people apart to make money for people who have too much money already. And he has lots of political talks in it. Sometimes I found some of the political arguments went on too long. There was just a little too much of those scenes. But basically, you can't help but sympathize with them. They're socialist rants from Steinbeck putting through his characters, and but it's and that may be one of the small weaknesses of the book, is that some of those passages go on a little bit long when we've already gotten the point. There's another thing that sort of slightly bothered me, which is, and again, I'm telling you the plot too much, but so they have this horrible trip west and they can't get work and nothing happens, and then they luck out and they hear about a government sponsored camp for people who are migrants, who have moved in, who have no money. I mean, you think about the migrant horrors going on today, it's the same thing. These families, these poor families being just destroyed by the system that treats them like crap. Just like they treat their own populations like crap, and they treat the migrants even worse. So there's a government camp that they can go to and stay. And they actually find a kind of a socialist paradise where the people are running this camp, and they're actually running it well. And the government helps out a bit, and they keep the cops out because the cops want to get rid of all these people. The cops are just totally in the pockets of the big farm owners and the big property owners, and they just want to get these people out or force them to go work for slave labor. And they're trying to they manage to keep this thing going, and it's quite an idyll. There's like a long 100 page passage where they're actually it's basically Steinbeck saying, look, we could do this, or we could do what we're doing. And he shows us this kind of nice utopian almost community. At one point they say they have to leave because they're broke and they need to go get a job. And I just think both times it happened, both times I read the book, I think, don't go, stay where you are, just stay where you are, don't go out there, don't go out there. And they do. And that's kind of a difficult part of the book for me. Anyway, it reminds me a lot because he tries to do a lot of things. He tries to give you history of the period. He goes in and out like animals' points of view. He's really good with animals, and he does desert tortoise. There's a desert tortoise in the beginning, which is particularly strong, and other animals they encounter. It reminds me a lot of John Dos Passos' The 42nd Parallel, the trilogy. There's 3 volumes, and they're all added together as the USA trilogy, which were also about individuals in these kind of tumultuous historical times. And it flashes back and forth between lots of different characters. And then it also tells you kind of historical flash biographies of famous people and cultural events and so forth. Anyway, it's quite an extraordinary book. I want to reread this too. And you can see some of the influence on this book. I'm not going to say too much more. I want to read 2 quick passages. If I have time, I think I'm going to have to make time, I guess. This is one example where he'll sometimes be with the characters' heads, but then he sort of has this kind of camera that moves around through these towns and cities and lives. And this is what these towns in Oklahoma look like after the people have left, because everybody's leaving. The doors of the empty houses swung open and drifted back and forth in the wind. Bands of little boys came out from the towns to break the windows and to pick over the debris, looking for treasures. And here's a knife with half the blade gone. That's a good thing. And smells like a rat died here. And look what Whitey wrote on the wall. He wrote that in the toilet in school, too, and teacher made him wash it off. When the folks first left, and the evening of the first day came, the hunting cats slouched in from the fields and mewed on the porch. And when no one came out, the cats crept to the open doors and walked mewing through the empty rooms. And then they went back to the fields and were wildcats from then on, hunting gophers and field mice and sleeping in ditches in the daytime. When the night came, the bats, which had stopped at the doors for fear of light, swooped into the houses and sailed through the empty rooms. And in a little while they stayed in dark room corners during the day, folded their wings high, and hung head down among the rafters, and the smell of their droppings was in the empty houses. And the mice moved in and stored weed seeds in corners and boxes in the backs of drawers in the kitchens, and weasels came in to hunt the mice, and the brown owls flew shrieking in and out again. This home for people, which has just been abandoned to nature and wildlife. It's just beautiful writing all through it, and that just this poetry. One last passage I'll read, and just to give a sense, no one writes more passionately about California. I'm a native Californian. I actually am proud to be a native Californian. I'm not proud of being a Native American, but I'm proud of, or a native of the country. But I'm very proud of being a native of California. And one of the things I've always loved about Steinbeck is he communicates a kind of love for the landscape that I love driving through all my life. Here's a brief passage. The spring is beautiful in California. Valleys in which the fruit blossoms are fragrant pink and white waters and a shallow sea. Then the first tendrils of the grapes swelling from the old gnarled vines cascade down to cover the trunks. The full green hills are round and soft as breasts, and on the level vegetable lands are the mile-long rows of pale green lettuce and the spindly little cauliflowers, the gray-green, unearthly artichoke plants. They are unearthly. They're all over our neighborhood. And then the leaves break out on the trees, and the petals drop from the fruit trees and carpet the earth with pink and white. The centers of the blossoms swell and grow in color, cherries and apples, peaches and pears, figs which close the flower and the fruit. All California quickens with produce, and the fruit grows heavy, and the limbs bend gradually under the fruit, so that little crutches must be placed under them to support the weight. Anyway, I think almost every paragraph of this book is beautifully written, but there's some of those that just fly, especially those passages about California. The whole thing goes on in another couple of pages, and I would read it to you, but we don't have time. We got to do these and get Dodo back in her home, and we'll talk to you all later, but this is definitely a book to read, definitely a book to enjoy. Probably my favorite Steinbeck is still probably The Dubious Battle. It's shorter, but it's similarly angry and beautiful about the organizing of great work of great pickers in California. And then this wonderful biography we've talked about before, Jackson E. Benson, one of my favorite biographies, literary biographies. It's a bit fat, but it flies by. It just flies by, and it's really a fun piece of writing for Steinbeck. And he loves Steinbeck's work and the person. He comes through very well. Okay, stay safe. Imagine the theme song, Classical Gas, and it's a hell yeah. That's what we call it here. Hell yeah. Stay safe.